At 15, when my life turned into hell, I realized that betrayal and lies have many faces. Dark secrets and escape from a bitter reality. When my parents separated, I didn't know it was just the beginning of a tense and unpredictable life. My father, once a kind man, became a suspicious, delusional figure, and my mother, who had sworn her love and loyalty, was entangled in a dangerous game with our neighbor, Joseph. This was just the start of a story filled with suspense and disappointment. Hello, I'm Eva. I was only 15 when my parents separated forever. Life wasn't so bad at first. My father was an oil company worker, and financially we were somewhat okay. I don't know what happened, but my father's demeanor suddenly changed. He continually accused my mother and sometimes beat her. My father would say, "Do you think I don't realize that you're involved with Joseph, the neighbor from the upper floor, who has no wife or children and lives alone? Do you think I don't understand that you're betraying me?" My heart ached for my mother, who was always innocent. In the midst of being beaten and crying, she would say, "You're mistaken, man. What betrayal are you talking about? You've become delusional. I've always loved you and our daughter, and I cherish our life together." My father would calm down a bit upon hearing this, and for a few days, our life would regain some love and affection, until everything started all over again. Since my father had seen my mother talking to our neighbor Joseph a few times, he became suspicious of her and told her, "You're involved with him. He's young, handsome. I don't look good anymore. You must have preferred him for this reason." My mother would respond to my father, saying, "Since when does saying hello mean getting too friendly? We live in the same apartment complex. Naturally, we see each other sometimes. Shouldn't I reply when he greets me? And besides, was I blind the day you came to propose to me? I chose you with this face. For God's sake, don't accuse me wrongly, man. I'm not unfaithful to cheat on my husband. I wouldn't trade a single hair of yours for 100 worlds." Whenever my mother said these things, my father's eyes would fill with tears, and sometimes, due to guilt over his accusations and countless beatings, he would apologize. But it was evident that the thought of betrayal was constantly eating away at his mind, like a termite. All the neighbors had become aware of my parents' disputes, as the house would become quiet and peaceful when my father went on work trips to the southern provinces. But as soon as he returned, the screams and cries of my poor mother could be heard again, echoing through the neighborhood. Once, there was a severe fight between my father and Joseph, during which Joseph threatened to take legal action against my father if he ever laid a hand on my mother again. After the fight with Joseph, my father came home and, while attacking my mother with a belt, said, "Now what do you have to say? That good-for-nothing easily defends you in front of me." Of course, he must. You must have won his heart, and he's got his eyes on you. Our life after my father's fight with Joseph truly turned into a real hell, with constant conflict and strife, until finally, my father quickly rented another house, and we moved there. My father didn't just stop at moving to a new house. He also asked my grandmother, who lived alone, to come to our house. In his absence, he wanted her to vigilantly monitor my mother's actions and behaviors and report even the smallest mistake to him. My mother, considering this control and surveillance an insult, deliberately went out for a few hours every day, ignoring my grandmother. As soon as my father returned from his trips, my grandmother would report my mother's activities to him. During such times, my father, like a wounded leopard, would again attack my poor mother, leaving her bruised and battered. Our life never saw peace again, and eventually, my mother had no choice but to file for divorce and went to live with her brother. With the rumors my father spread about my mother, all our relatives, even those in my mother's family who had always seen my father as a complete and perfect man and believed his words, completely ostracized my mother. She was forced to seek refuge with her uncle. Once a week, despite my father's objections, I would visit my mother and cry in her arms. A few months after my parents' separation, I learned that my mother intended to remarry. Although upset, I felt she was justified. She remarried quietly, without even telling me who her spouse was, and went to start her new life. It seemed her new husband had forbidden any contact between me and my mother. My mother said she had spoken to her husband about me, but he didn't want me visiting their house. One day, my father came home and said, "Get ready quickly. I want to take you somewhere so you can see the truth with your own eyes." I didn't know what my father was thinking. Ava, my mother's close friend who was still in touch with her, also joined us. My father took us to the north of the city, and we stopped in front of a chic and luxurious house. Ava rang the doorbell. Moments later, my mother appeared at the door, stunned to see me and my father. I was utterly confused and had no idea what was going on. Without waiting for my mother to explain, my father entered the house and motioned for me to follow, saying, "Come inside and see your mother's husband for yourself." There I saw my mother's husband. It was Joseph. My father, with a smirk on his face, said, "Do you now believe that I wasn't making things up? These two have been in a relationship since then, since the time your mother swore she loved me and our life together. I knew you wouldn't believe me no matter what I said." At that moment, as my mother tried to justify herself to me, I felt awful. I felt like I had lost everything in life. My mother had completely fallen from grace in my eyes, to the point where I no longer wanted to see or hear her. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like it. I'm eager to read your thoughts on what might happen next to Eva and what future awaits her writing hand. I was so disturbed and shattered that one night, I attempted suicide by dissolving my grandmother's tranquilizer pills in a glass of water and drinking it. I wanted to die and escape all those troubled thoughts. But, unfortunately, my father, who was trying to get closer to me during those days, noticed and immediately rushed me to the hospital. After that incident, my relationship with my father improved. It was clear that he loved me more than my mother did. One night, I told him that my mother deserved everything she got from him. She ruined our lives because of Joseph. "You're still young, Dad. I don't want you to be alone. I want you to get married again. In fact, I found a good match for you." That night, although my father initially resisted the idea of remarrying, I could tell from his words that he wasn't entirely against it. I had chosen Ava, a divorced woman, for him, and apparently, he liked her too. Eventually, my father and Ava quickly got married. At first, Ava was kind to me and tried to establish a friendly relationship. However, she didn't want me living with them and kept telling my father, "Why should your daughter live with us? Why doesn't she go to her unfaithful mother? I am a woman and want to have children, but as long as your daughter Eva is with us, you won't show enough affection for my child." My father, unable to bear this miserable situation and unwilling to leave Ava and her child, sent me to live with my grandmother. That's when my days of misery began. I stopped going to school and couldn't stand staying at home with my grandmother's bad temper and constant nagging. To escape from my grandmother's nagging, I would spend hours outside the house every day. It was during those days that I met Elio and, at his suggestion, I ran away from home. Elio had painted a picture of a sweet and fairy tale life for me. I went with him to his bachelor pad and started a new life with him and two other girls and boys who were his friends. At first, everything was good. Elio spared no love and affection for me, always showing himself as my devoted lover and saying he was waiting for his family to return from a trip so we could get married. I was truly on cloud 9 in those days. However, after living with Elliot for 5 months, having a relationship with him, and getting trapped in the snare of addiction, I realized that all his promises were lies, just a deception for people like me. His house was truly a den of corruption. Determined to escape Elio's trap, I decided to flee from his house. One night, when Elio was asleep after excessive use of meth, I was in the process of escaping from the house when, to my disbelief, I saw Elio wake up. He was unsteady, like a madman, coming at me with a knife in hand. Suddenly, the knife fell from his hand, and I, terrified, seized the opportunity. With trembling hands, I picked up the knife and instinctively stabbed Elio's lifeless body multiple times from behind. He collapsed to the ground, and then I hurriedly left the house. After wandering the city streets for a while, the police found me, and I inevitably confessed to my crime. Dear friends, this part of our story has come to an end, but our adventure continues. If you want to immerse yourself more in this thrilling and mysterious world, don't miss the next videos on my channel. Together, we will explore a different world where each video is a new step in this exciting and surprising journey.